Hey guys, this is Mrs. Harden, and welcome to Chapter 4 of Pre-Calculus. We just finished up Chapter 3, which is about all different types of functions, and we looked at various functions and their graphs, and the domains and ranges of those functions, and we found the zeros and the asymptotes. Some of the functions that we've looked at were power functions, exponential functions, piece functions, trig functions, and rational functions. Now, we're not done with functions just yet. We are going to continue with functions in this chapter, and this chapter is going to focus specifically on inverse functions. Now, before we get to inverse functions, we need to talk a little bit about some new terminology. Maybe not new terminology. You've seen this concept before when talking about inequalities and when talking about functions. We're just going to maybe show it to you in a different way, apply it to functions. Make sure you have this vocabulary down before we go further into inverse functions. So let's take a look at increasing and decreasing functions. Our biblical correlation for this unit is from 2 Chronicles 26:6, and we've seen this verse before. Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and at the angle of the wall, and he fortified them. We have all throughout Scripture examples of people using mathematics to accomplish things, such as building. And we want to make sure that as you're working through this course and as you finish this course, you're not just doing a bunch of problems on paper, but you're actually thinking about the real world applications of these mathematics and thinking about what you can possibly do once you graduate to apply mathematics in a way that can help others and help creation. Our lesson objective for today is you, the student, will give intervals where a function is increasing or decreasing using interval notation and identify one-to-one functions using the horizontal line test. We're also going to identify functions without using the horizontal line test using the definition. We're going to identify them also using the definition. So let's take a look at something that hopefully looks familiar to you. We've got a number line here, and we've got this little segment that's shown on our number line. Now, previously, you saw something like this when dealing with inequalities. And you, if I asked you to write the inequality, would hopefully remember to write something like this, that x is greater than or equal to -2, less than or equal to, what number is that, 1? Right, we know that it's greater than or equal to and less than or equal to because we have these solid dots. So this is something that should be a review for you. In this particular chapter, we're going to learn how to write this notation in a different way, writing interval notation. This is what we call a closed interval. It includes both endpoints, and it's represented with square brackets. So previously, you've learned how to notate this using inequalities. Today, we're going to learn how to notate it with square brackets using interval notation. It is closed because these circles, you can imagine that they are filled in, they are closed. It includes the endpoints. And we can write that notation as -2 and 1 with these brackets. Now, the first thing you may see is looking at that, you may go, well, that looks exactly like an ordered pair, except for there's square brackets instead of parentheses. The square brackets are a clue. However, the other clue that's going to be a hint to you that we're dealing with an interval and not an ordered pair is the context of the question. So you need to pay careful attention to what it is you're being asked to find so that you don't think it's an ordered pair. Again, this is our interval. This is not an ordered pair. And because it's closed, we're using these square brackets. All right, here's another example, hopefully you've seen before. Again, with inequalities, we would have written this as x is greater than 1 and less than 4. In this case, our circles are open. We don't have that equal to under our greater than or less than signs. And we've got our two endpoints there on either side of the x. Well, to write that in interval notation, we call this, first of all, an open interval. That makes sense, right? Our circles are open. It does not include the endpoints. Circles are open. And it's going to be represented with parentheses. Now, in the previous screen, looking at the closed interval, closed was represented with brackets. That was really easy to distinguish between a closed interval and an ordered pair. But here, we have parentheses, which looks just like an ordered pair. Again, the context is going to be important. Pay attention to what it is that you're being asked to find so you don't think that this is an ordered pair. This is just a different way to represent our interval, our segment. Again, you've seen this before with inequalities, and now we're moving you to interval notation. If one endpoint is included and the other is not, the interval is referred to as half open or half closed. As an inequality, you might have seen something like this. 0 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 3. In interval notation, we're going to write that with a bracket because the 0 is closed, and a parentheses at the 3 because the 3 is open. Let me go back here and let's graph that really quickly so you can see what that would look like on a number line. We would have a closed circle on the 0. We would have an open circle on the 3. And then this segment would be colored here in between. Pardon the messiness of my handwriting here. So that's what it would look like on a number line. So it is possible for an interval to be half open or half closed. Intervals may be of infinite length. The symbols infinity and negative infinity are used to indicate the lack of a bound. Going back to our previous slide, we talked about this being our interval. The number on the left here, one terminology or one term that we didn't use, the term on the left here is called our lower bound. And what do you think the term on the right is? The number on the right is going to be called our upper bound. So in this particular interval, our lower bound is 0 and our upper bound is 3. Well, sometimes we are boundless, and in that case, we're going to use those infinities. That is the lack of a bound. On a number line, it might look something like this. Okay, maybe your whole entire segment, including the arrows here in the end, keeps going forever and ever and ever, and then going this way forever and ever and ever. When we dealt with inequalities and we were trying to find solutions, we would say our solution was all real numbers. And what that means is that there is a lack of a bound. And so we would represent this with our lower bound is negative infinity, and our upper bound is positive infinity. Notice that we are using these parentheses here and not brackets. Brackets indicate that the point is included. And since infinity and negative infinity aren't numbers to be included, we can't use a square bracket. We've got to use parentheses. Take a look at this example and see if you can write this set in interval notation. The first thing you should notice is that there's a closed circle here. So that's going to tell us to use a bracket. And our arrow keeps going forever and ever and ever. So we know our upper bound is going to be infinity. All we have to do is identify this lower bound, and we see it's -2. So in interval notation, this is square bracket -2, infinity, parentheses. All right, let's move on past interval notation. Hopefully you got that really quickly. And let's move on to the second part of our lesson here, which is dealing with one-to-one correspondence of sets and increasing and decreasing functions. A pairing of elements of two sets so that any element of either set is paired with exactly one element of the other set. When we first started talking about functions, we would write our x and y points or coordinates here as two different sets. If you remember, you might have this over here, and we would draw lines, and we said, oh, in order to be a function, there can only be one line from each x value. I can't have 2 going to 5 and 2 going to 4. So this is an example of a function. So we've seen this sets before. Now, one-to-one correspondence is a special type of function that has a bit more specific of a rule than just a regular function. Let's take a look at some examples here in a second to help you visualize that. Again, the definition is more restrictive than the definition of a function. So we have functions, and then within that we have a subcategory of one-to-one functions. So take a look. We've got our two circles here. We've got our domain values, our x values over here on the left. Don't forget, domain is your x values, and our range values, our y values here on the right. And looking at this, this is a function. From every x value, there's just one line. Boom, boom, boom. This is a function. However, it is not a one-to-one function, because when we look at the range, there are two values coming to this 5. So it is a function, but it is not a one-to-one function. In a one-to-one function, each x value can only have one y value. Each y value can only have one x value. So again, this is a function, but it is not one-to-one. Okay, here is our definition of a one-to-one function. A function is one-to-one if and only if f of a equals f of b implies, if the f of a equals f of b implies that a equals b for all a's or b's in the domain of a function. Let's again put some real equations with this to help you see. All right, so let's use this function here. Y equals x squared. If we were to write that in function notation, we would write f of x equals x squared. So let's try two different numbers here, an a and a b. Let's do f of 2. F of 2 equals 2 squared, which is 4. And then f of negative 2. F of negative 2 equals negative 2 squared, which is 4. So f of a, this one, does in fact equal f of b. So far, so good. But if that's true, then a should also equal b. And looking at our a and our b, 2 and negative 2, they are not equal. So in this case, this is not a one-to-one function. Both parts of this statement, this definition, have to be true. F of a equals f of b has to be true, and a equals b also has to be true. We can test functions to see if they're one-to-one functions by using this definition. Here's another example. Let's say we have f of x equals 7x plus 4. And we want to know if this is a one-to-one function. Well, let's actually plug in a and b. So f of a is going to be 7a plus 4. And f of b is going to be 7b plus 4. Pardon my handwriting. According to our definition of a one-to-one function, if these are equal and a equals b, then we have a one-to-one function. So let's set them equal to each other. 7a plus 4 equals 7b plus 4. And we can use our properties of algebra to solve here. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. That's our addition property. We're going to add negative 4 to both sides. So I'm left with 7a equals 7b. I divide both sides by 7 and I get a equals b. Hey, that was the second part of our one-to-one function definition. So 7x plus 4 is a one-to-one function. Now, there is another way that we can determine if a function is one-to-one, but it does involve graphing. Think back to the test that we did to identify whether something was a function, and that was the vertical line test. If we look at this graph and we pass a vertical line through it, it only passes through our function or our line once, so that is a function. This was not a function because a vertical line would pass through it at 2 points, both here and here. So that one is not a function. So the vertical line test can help us determine if something is a function. The horizontal line test indicates whether or not a function is one-to-one. So go back to our parabola here, our x squared function. Remember, we just showed on the previous slide that y equals x squared was not a function by the definition, or not a one-to-one function by the definition. If we were to graph y equals x squared and pass a horizontal line through it, we would see that it passes that function, it passes through that function twice. So it is not a one-to-one function. All right, glancing at the time, I am running out of time, so I'm going to pause the video right here for part 1, and we will finish up the second part in part 2. See you in just a minute.